Yes, I'm the other Keith, so I'm the English Keith. And I wanted to thank Ted and the team at Science Park for inviting us and giving us the opportunity to talk today. So my talk's going to be slightly different. It's going to be really a case study about our journey on developing a small product as a small company. So as Magnus said, I2R is a specialised medical device development and healthcare innovation company. And we've basically been working on that since 2009, and we've had some methodologies that we follow to help people develop devices, and they are very simple. They're about understanding the unmet need, then having a product solution to meet that need, and then putting the IP around it. A lot of the ideas that we've come across in the past, especially when I was in the corporate world, and one of my jobs there was to assess new ideas, there's often two of those elements were in place, but not all three. So often there was a fantastic technology, there might have been some IP, but there wasn't a clear unmet need or value proposition. So when we go about looking at ideas and developing products, we always try to look at those three. So we did that been doing that for several years, but as a consultancy company, a lot of people ask us, well, that's fine, but how do you show us something that you've done? So we decided to really put those ideas into practice and put our sort of money where our mouth is, and actually use those methodologies to develop a device. So we set about doing exactly that. So we were supported, like the other companies, by the UK SBRI, which is a small business research initiative, which has been fantastic actually for us. Has really helped us to really get this thing off the ground. And with our own resources, we set about looking at an unmet need and then designing a product into that need. And so the area that we focused on was chronic and hard to heal wounds, specifically things like diabetic foot ulcers. And that really is a problem in the UK, and it is globally as well. So these things are really quite nasty. I had one that was much more gory than that, but I thought I wasn't quite sure the audience. So, these things can be around for a long time, really painful, and basically they're really debilitating. So there's quite a lot of statistics around this, but some recent stuff has shown that, in the UK alone, there's 60,000 plus people with these type of conditions at any one time. And it's estimated that somewhere around sort of 660 million a year is spent trying to treat these. And it's not just the treatment, it's the ongoing complexity, and it can lead to amputations. And it's a really, really expensive problem, and it's growing. So we've looked at actually trying to address this. So there is a treatment that's been around for some years that has been quite promising for treating these complex wounds, and that's a therapy called negative pressure wound therapy. And essentially, it's quite a straightforward process. It uses a negative pressure or a vacuum applied to the wound, and that essentially does several things. It includes drawing away the infectious wound exudates and promoting perfusion to the wound surface, stimulating the body's own growth factors. It's been around for about 20 years. It originally came out of the States, and there's a lot of evidence that's been put around there, varying quality, I would say. But it is now in widespread clinical use. One of the issues is the devices in the past have been quite large because they're hospital-based, so they're quite large, expensive pieces of kit that require electronics and software and vacuum pumps, and they're not really suited to the home care environment. So this is a very simplified view of the conventional system. So on the left-hand side, you have the air pump, the vacuum pump, and all the electronics and control system associated with that. And then that is then coupled to what's best described as a sort of rigid plastic container. And then that's connected in turn down to the dressing down at the wound site. And it means that the canister has to be rigid to withstand the vacuum, and you need all the control systems and alarms and all this stuff within the device. And the products traditionally have been very expensive, and they're big, they're quite complicated to use. So we set about trying to come up with a way of giving exactly the same therapy down at the wound site, but doing it in a much more simplified way. So our system works in a different way, in the fact that it actually uses a fluid pump to pull the fluid away, generate the vacuum, and then put that fluid into a flexible bag. So at the wound site, everything is exactly the same pressures, same dressings, but it's just the way, the methodologies in generating that pressure. That's enabled us to reduce the size of everything and make it much, much simpler. And in the home care environment, the product needs to be very, very easy to use. So we basically, our journey was that we used our own resources, and then we set about applying to the SBRI, and we got a phase 1, which is like a feasibility fund for over 6 months, and then a phase 2 product development fund, and that enabled us to really develop the product. And the most important part of the whole journey was really making sure we collected those unmet needs. So a lot of the time and the money that we spent was actually going out to clinicians, nurses, both in hospitals and also in the home, and actually understanding exactly what was required. So we saw there was a real need for a product that could actually start in the hospital and then stay with the patient through the journey. Because in the UK, and I don't think it's the same over here, but in the UK, the way the health system works is very much sort of segmented. You've got the acute sector and the home care sector, and that transition is always difficult in terms of funding. So what happens often is that a patient will be put on a piece of equipment in the hospital, but when they're transitioned to the home, they can't take the product with them because of the way the budgets work. So with this device, we've designed it in such a way with a cost base where it's a single-use device. It stays with the patient for the entire treatment for 6 weeks. So it starts in the hospital and then transitions with the patient into the home. So that's where it's a little bit different. So part of my talk today was really just to say that, this journey that a lot of people have said to us in the past, it's very difficult to develop a product as a small company, especially quite a complicated device like this. And it's true, because most of the companies developing products in this space are multinationals, and the regulatory pathway is quite involved because it's essentially 3 products in one, because you've got an electronic element and then you've got the sterile part. And there's a lot of patents out there as well, because it's been around for 20 odd years, a lot of Americans patents. And the resource required to develop a product like this, because you basically are touching all parts of technology and the clinical usability, all of these things. And so, it's challenging from that respect. But there is also major advantages as well. It allows us to be much more agile, and because I came from a corporate background, and it was often difficult to get decisions made quickly. So we were able to engage very quickly with users and actually make changes. In a couple of weeks, we could go back and show them different things that we were trying. Much less bureaucracy, and the speed to market was much, much quicker as well. And we can get that direct feedback from clinical users. And also, we're able to use some quite modern innovation techniques, which primarily some of the bigger companies don't always have the opportunity to do. So this is one that we use to do with patent landscaping. So there's thousands of patents out there, especially in this type of area. And what happens often is a company tries to develop a product, they get down the road and find out they're blocked because there's patents already in that space. So this is a new technique that's coming out now that uses text mining software to look at all the patents and groups them into clusters. So you see those white ones down in the bottom left and one at the top. That's a collection of patents. So if we had all the patents in this area in this room, we all read them, we would put them into piles, and that's exactly what this software does. So you primarily want to avoid the white areas. So our patents that we're building up are in that circle. So we're away from kind of the major IP, and it's quite useful. And it's something that's basically evolving. In a few years' time, I think it's going to be the way forward, really, much more accessible. So this is the actual product. There's a device. It's a Class 2A device because it's an electronic product, active product. It's essentially got a fluid canister at the bottom, which is a Class 1, and then the sterile dressing, which is Class 2B. So the whole thing is quite small, and it goes in a box. It can be basically sent through the post. A big market potentially for this, as with Mike's product, is the emerging markets as well. So you don't need the training and the infrastructure as you do with the more complex devices. So where we are at the moment, it's currently CE marked. It's now into manufacturing. Supply chain is in place, and the FDA 510K is actually going through the process. And now we've got clinical evaluations going in Europe, UK and Europe. And we're going to be sort of launching it at the beginning of next year. So this is just a quick overview of the actual product itself. A quick video. Obviously, these are the bits all connected. And the difference with this product and other ones out there, it's very, very simple to use. It's essentially got one button, and it hasn't got, you just press a button and off it goes. And basically, the product takes care of itself. It starts pumping away, and it starts generating the negative pressure. So that pink thing, I imagine that's a wound. So it's drawing up the air and the fluid, and the pressure builds up to 125 millimeters. It can be 100, it can be 75, depending on the clinician. And instead of using a lot of electronics, to control the pressures, we use a mechanical valve, which is quite an innovation. So it makes everything a lot simpler. And then basically all the air and the fluid gets pumped into the device, and then it fills up the bag inside. And then when it gets full, it shuts the thing down, and they change it. So yeah, it couldn't really be much simpler, really. And that's basically, it's been an interesting journey, and we're not there yet. But you know, we've definitely had a lot of support from the SBRI, which was really, because it was different, and to get private funding for something like that would be quite difficult because it's quite risky. So that's it. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Keith. One often hears that if you compare medtech to pharma, some people claim it's easier to do the development in medtech and then the marketing is a nightmare. In pharma, it's often the opposite.
Right.
So,
Yes.
I mean, going back, you have taken this all the way now to a stage where it's all about marketing, I guess.
Yes.
To some extent. Mm-hmm. Going to that point, what is the key learning? Would you have done anything different?
We probably would have, if we had the resources, we probably would have engaged with more markets. But at the moment, we really just engaged with the UK, Netherlands, Germany. And the problem with this product is that the reimbursement pathways are different in every country. We spoke about that a little bit.
So it is reimbursed?
It is reimbursable.
Yeah.
But it's not actually on the reimbursement registers yet. We're going through that process at the moment. Yeah. But every country's got a different system. So probably it would have made sense to, if we had the resources, to do some of that earlier on.
And you mentioned you were about to get clinical data now. Do you need that data in order to get the reimbursement in place, I guess?
No, we don't need that in the markets that we're accessing at the moment, because basically the NPWT is actually quite well established in terms of a clinical therapy. As long as we can prove our product produces the same output.
So it's basically convenience that is your key edge here?
Usability, yeah, and price as well. It's significantly cheaper in terms of purchase price. And it's a different model. It's essentially a single-use device. It just basically lasts for 6 weeks, so you don't need the infrastructure and people going in and cleaning them and all this stuff, maintaining them. So we're hoping to access a different market, really, this transitional market, which hasn't really been truly sort of served. And also, you know, the new markets, the emerging markets as well, they're very interesting for us because, you know, they don't have the infrastructure out there to support the traditional products.
Any additional questions? We have one in the middle there.
Can you comment on...
Use the microphone, please. Sorry.
Kai Brickman from AstraZeneca. Can you comment on the timescale that you expect to take it from the FDA for the 510K application?
So very interesting. So obviously they've got this 90-day kind of window, but you can go on there and look at the times, typical times for, I think it's an OMO or something, that product class. So there's a lot of NPWT devices out there, and they're range from 77 days to 420. So we're hoping we're going to be around 100 days, hopefully. We've done a pretty thorough job in actually putting it together, the 510K. It's with them now, but you just never know, really. I mean, our product is not that controversial in a sense because it uses traditional sort of technologies that are known, and we've done a lot of sort of, head-to-head and bench testing. But we are sort of telling people it's probably 6 months, really, realistically. Okay.
Thank you. So it's good to have a company that hasn't been under pressure so far. So thank you very much.
Excuse me. Just one additional question.
Keep it short, please, in light of time.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I will. I'm Dan Peters from DanPet. And my question is, have you compared your product with blood-sucking old traditional leashes?
Yes, obviously the equivalence to those this device has been likened to leeches and maggots and things like that. So obviously there is some synergies with things like leeches, drawing away fluid, increasing perfusion. So that definitely is one of the mechanisms of action. The other thing this does is because of the foam, it uses micro deformation, which basically puts pressure on the skin tissue bed. So that's it's another mechanism of action. So yeah, there are some synergies with leeches.
Great topic for coffee, I think.
Yeah.
Thank you, Keith.